It's one of the most debated topics in all of sport right now, concussion and its links with CTE. So why is everyone debating a medical issue that in recent times has seen many of our stars finish early? Or no one is really arguing about CTE, concussion and head knocks, but more about what should be done or not done to the AFL in terms of its playing rules. It has all come together in a massive 100-player class action against the governing body led by Max Rook and Peter Jess. The AFL is changing right in front of us, whether you like it or not.
This is really sad news, not just for Melbourne Football Club and football fans around the country, but also for Angus Brayshaw, who's the 2021 Premiership player who's been forced to retire due to repeated head knocks and the ongoing impacts of concussion. Now, yes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everyone. It's obviously a tough decision and one that's quite hard, but I feel very lucky to have come up here and played for the Swans. I love the crowd. They've been so good to me ever since I got up here, and the support I've had the last few weeks has been amazing. So, yeah, thank you to everyone here. I feel very, very lucky.
A blow yesterday for the ever-popular Paul Seedsman. He's been moved alongside Mackesy to the inactive list after ongoing struggles with concussion.
These are only a few of the handful of players that have been medically retired due to concussions. Angus Brayshaw has been the most headlined due to his career achievements and impact at Melbourne. These retirements have been going on for some time. It's scary, especially when Brayshaw revealed scans had shown microscopic changes in his brain. He's just 28 years old. The horror stories of brain trauma and CTE are well known, but worth a mention to detail how much life can change after just one big incident. Daniel Venables, the youngest member of West Coast's 2018 Premiership side, played his last game in round 9 2019, missing 2020 and 2021 due to ongoing concussion symptoms he suffered after just one heavy head knock. The Shane Tuck and Danny Frawley deaths were tragic, with both having strong links to CTE. Various former players have come out and told of their stories, battling with the effects multiple head trauma incidents can bring over time. These hits can change your life. It's why this class action is here, to try and get compensation from the AFL for the damage that has been done to these players. It's getting bigger and stronger by the week as the action by Darren Jarman, Jay Schultz and Shane Tuck's family was discontinued, as all parties will be joining the mega class action. There are still numerous separate lawsuits from other players, including Liam Picken, Gary Ablett Sr. and Ty Zantuck. But this is where it gets complicated, not just from a legal perspective with all the jargon and technicalities, but through culpability. The big story in the Herald Sun was the AFL's argument in the case. Craig Dunlop reported that in documents filed in the Victorian Supreme Court as part of the class action, in which Rook is the lead plaintiff, the league has revealed it will argue the clubs, as the AFL players' employers, along with the AFL players themselves, are primarily responsible for players' health and well-being. So simply, the AFL is pointing the finger at all the clubs and players when it comes to their health. The reasoning is that the players knew and accepted the risks of playing a professional contact sport. It's an upfront argument that is pushing all the blame away from the AFL. Now, I'm not a legal expert, and this is just my 2 cents, but how on earth hasn't the AFL implemented some form of a concussion or head knock waiver? It's something Collingwood CEO Craig Kelly was open to in the future, but was dismissed by new AFL football boss Laura Kane. So when the AFL argues that players such as Rook, who suffered 23 head knocks, knew the risks well, what proof do they have? If you had a signed waiver or document that declared they accepted the risk, then it would make far more sense. It's what has made campaigner Peter Jess so upset. It's unbelievably insulting to every player who has taken the field, Jess said. The AFL is blaming the players for the concussion factory which now exists. How do you tell a young draftee with little or no life skills that the employment he or she is about to undertake is likely to lead to brain damage and it is their fault? As the AFL says, any reasonable person would know. It's frightening in the extreme, he told the Herald Sun. It's a big point in the AFL's argument they are not accepting responsibility. You would think how vocal they are about protecting the head and implementing new protocols that they would own up and take responsibility. As the class action is still relatively young, hopefully the AFL does and they can mediate. It would probably save them a lot of money in legal fees and comparatively if they were to lose the class action, and would give a public perception that the AFL really cares about the health of all players, past and present. But the only thing the AFL has remotely done close to this in the case is argued that they have made at least 30 rule changes since 2000 in a bid to reduce the risk of players suffering concussion. Not exactly the stuff of heroes. Jess said that until recently, the AFL and club doctors did not accept causation of CTE through repeated traumas. In fact, the message to players was that CTE did not exist in the AFL and concussion did not create permanent, structural or functional impairment to the brain, Jess said. Players did not understand the issues given the contradictory advice from the AFL, the doctors and in fact the AFLPA. This argument from the AFL is a continuation of the blame game to the detriment of all involved, which are the players, the wives and partners and the children. It's early on, but hopefully the governing body can work out a deal with the 100 players and families to give them the adequate compensation and move in a direction to help limit as best as possible the risk of getting head knocks on the field. In a quick medical aside, the other aspect that has made the class action against the AFL and other similar legal cases in sport so difficult is knowledge. It's hard to find a pinpoint date, but going back to the 60s, 70s and 80s, concussion wasn't a big issue at all in the AFL. From what I've seen, it became something of note in the NFL in the 90s to mid-2000s, but even the NRL and Football Australia didn't accept the link between CTE and concussion until 2023. The AFL didn't have any concussion management guidelines until 2006 and didn't introduce a concussion spotter until 2020. It's baffling, but I do think it's because nobody really knew how severe all this was, as you can only see CTE in the brain when a person has passed. So for those cases that relate to say the 80s and 90s, did the AFL have any understanding of the seriousness of repeated head knocks? You can also argue at the time they should have been looking harder, but the medical research and data is relatively new and it's something that I'm sure will be discussed in the legal battles. So moving forward, what can the AFL introduce to try and limit contact to the head? This is where the major debate is. The Maynard rule means jumping up in the air to smother is now a risky thing to do, and we all know the crackdown on tackling, especially pinning the arm, which even when I played as a junior, you were taught to do. I know a lot of people don't like the technical aspects of tackling changes, but it's what the law is now enforcing. I also think from this year onwards, any bumps to the head will now be big suspensions. Sam Powell-Pepper just got 4 weeks for a hit that I think a couple of years ago would only be 2 or 3 weeks. Even the Cripps incident against Calamachi, which almost caused him to not win the Brownlow, would be a good chance to hold up as a suspension on all legal challenges. So I think that's the first incremental shift. Secondly, limiting all training, especially pre-season sessions, is a must. I'll be shocked if this isn't implemented soon, and I'm still confused that the AFLPA didn't flesh this out when negotiating the CBA. Less physical contact sessions ultimately equals less chance of concussion before the season starts. And reading the Herald Sun, Lee Matthews made the suggestion of less interchanges. Not only will fatigue be brought into the game quicker, but it can help slow down collision speed and impact. For all the tightening of the rules to prevent high contact, in my opinion, the modern game is more dangerous than the fabled, more violent days of generations past, Matthews wrote in a column for The Nightly. Much of the problem is player-driven. If we really want to make the game safer to play, maybe more fatigue is part of the answer. No on-field rule changes required, just massively reducing or eliminating interchange should be seriously considered as part of the search for that better way. And when a player is concussed, sitting out for 21 days is looking more likely. It may frustrate you as a fan, but we just can't have young men retiring before 30. Head knocks, concussion and CTE have become a huge story in all contact sports. It affects the leagues, clubs and the players, and it's an ever-evolving discussion as new research constantly comes out. The AFL is changing right in front of us, and we are all going to have to jump on board.